Oh, I was muted there. Been having some technical difficulties. Finally got the old streaming service here to connect to YouTube, so should be good to go. Business as usual. It's Tuesday night, 7:30. So I'm here to talk Dynasty with you guys on air till about 8:30. I've got a couple of transactions I can go over, some interesting questions you guys dropped in the chat, and then I thought that I could recap some recent trades that I've made because been on kind of a trading spree the last couple of days after not doing a whole lot for the past few weeks. So, I have some different types of deals here that I figured I could go over and talk about kind of what was my process behind it and really get into like what is the position of my roster that led to this type of a trade, or was it more about the player specifically, or was it a structure, team direction type of deal? So we'll get into those after we go into the transactions. Hope you guys are doing good tonight. Hope you guys are excited for week 1. Just 2 days away now from Chiefs Ravens. What a kickoff game! Also, like that's got to be one of the best like opening night matchups that we've had is Chiefs Ravens. That's gonna be pretty sick. Jumping in here, I don't have a ton honestly for transactions. Like I just put out the video earlier today. I don't know if you guys have all watched it yet. Talking about some preseason takeaways. So there's a little bit of like guys I'm buying, guys I'm selling in that, and I just feel like we've talked about everybody. Like it's time to get some new information with these games to really recalibrate how we feel about all these players. But there are a couple of like lesser tier players that we could talk about. So a couple of players you could look at adding if they are available in your league. It really just it depends on the depth of your league, how many players you roster. But I think Samaje Perine is a guy who maybe isn't rostered in every league. He definitely should be rostered in every league. He has kind of an interesting spot now in Kansas City where he can really step into like the Jerick McKinnon role. So I don't think people think of Samaje Perine as having fantasy upside or fantasy interest. He's more of like a guy that ruins the running back that you like all summer as a best ball player. People were just talking about what if he goes to the Bengals and ruins Chase Brown? What if he goes to what was that other team? The Cowboys and ruins Rico Dowdle or whatever. But nobody really talked about what kind of role Samaje Perine could have. In Kansas City, that becomes a lot more interesting because we've seen how Andy Reid uses Jerick McKinnon. And after Isaiah Pacheco, there's really just nothing there. Like people are getting excited about Carson Steele. He's a UDFA. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is on the NFI list now. So Perine should have a role right away. And I don't think he's going to be startable in his like default role. But if Isaiah Pacheco were to miss time, Perine has the size and the experience where the coach might just trust him to play all 3 downs for like 2 or 3 games and not necessarily feel the need to split the work up too much or bring in a different player to carry the ball, because he's not going to be super explosive. He's not going to make big plays, but he's also not going to make big mistakes either. So I think Perine is a player you could put a decent bid on if he's available. And if not, just look for opportunities. If you're making trades anyway, get him thrown in. I really like putting these types of running backs on the bench and just holding them during the season, because like if you have enough of these running backs in Dynasty, you almost always have somebody that you can play in a pinch. And so you don't have to worry as much about your RB2 spot, at least during the season. You can kind of just do a little musical chairs with whatever running back is in a starting role that week. And then another player that you could add if he's available. Again, not sure who's available and who's not in your league. I actually need to find a source for like what percentage What's the rostership percentage? Actually, does Sleeper show the rostership percentage? I guess they do. They probably do show that, don't they? And I'm just stupid. Let me take a look here. So the player I'm talking about is Malik Washington. Yep, I can see that. So he's rostered in 65% of leagues. I don't know if that means all leagues or Dynasty. I have to imagine it's just Dynasty leagues because there's no way he's rostered in like hardly any of the redraft stuff they have going. So 65% of Dynasty leagues, he's rostered. That means there's a 35% chance he's sitting out on your waiver wire right now. And that is super interesting because he was a really productive wide receiver in college. I don't actually know why he fell so far into day 3, but Mike McDaniel seemed pretty excited about picking him up. And right now, he's kind of the wide receiver 3 for the Dolphins. They only carried 4 into the season, I believe, with Odell Beckham on PUP, and he's one of those 4. So he should get playing time right away. And you know, if you're playing in a Dynasty Best Ball League, he's super interesting because he could have a big play in like any game and get in your lineup. But otherwise, more of a contingent bet. Like if Waddle or Tyreek Hill miss time, he really has the opportunity to step into a large role. And in this offense where everything is so schemed up and manufactured, I don't even know how good he has to be necessarily, but I do think he is good or has a chance to be good. So he's one of the most interesting wide receivers that you can stash right now. I'm not usually into the day 3 guys, but just given the offensive situation and how kind of strong his production profile was, I'm definitely into adding Malik Washington wherever you can. And then another transaction here would be a sell. And I was looking for like, who am I selling? Who have I not talked about already? Because like I have plenty of players I would sell, but I just feel like I'd be retreading old takes and old arguments that I've already put in videos and stuff. Like, you know, I talked about Derrick Henry the other week. I've talked about Jared Goff ad nauseum. But a player who's like well down the board, who doesn't necessarily carry a ton of value, but one of the trending players on Sleeper, I've seen a little bit of buzz about them. I've thought their underdog ADP has been way too high all offseason, and that's Darnell Mooney, who is now a starting wide receiver for the Falcons. I just really don't get it with Darnell Mooney. Like, he had one interesting season like a million years ago. But then last season, even the last 2 seasons, he's had tons of opportunity. He was already a full-time starter for the Bears last year, got 60 targets, 31 receptions, 414 receiving yards. So that's in 15 games played. His yards per out run last year, 0.94. So under 1 yards per out run. I know he had a mobile quarterback, an inaccurate quarterback in Justin Fields. That's still like extremely bad. And then you go back to the 2022 season. But in the 2022 season, I don't know. He was better in 2022. So maybe I'm just wrong. He played 12 games in 2022, and he had a 2.2 yards per out run. That was the year before DJ Moore came to Chicago. So I don't know. Maybe I'm selling Darnell Mooney a little bit short. It's just I really struggle with how bad he was last year. And so even in that, even knowing his 2022 numbers, I would still sell him at any time for a second round pick. Easily. I don't know if you're getting that really, but like if you could trade Mooney and a third and get a second, or Mooney and a fourth or 2 fourths and get a second, I just don't think he's ever going to be the type of producer that you're going to want to put into your lineup. And I guess you could argue like maybe he has some contingent upside if London gets hurt or Pitts gets hurt, but he's almost 27. We've really never seen him be a real fantasy producer for an extended stretch of time. So I'm not putting a lot of stock in that like I would with a younger wide receiver who still kind of has that breakout potential. Like we kind of know who he is. So again, not a high profile sell, not a huge deal if he's on your roster because he doesn't carry that much value, but just a guy who I've seen getting a little bit of buzz that, you could potentially use as a piece in trades. That one candy bar says that this will be my first Dynasty season. I'm doing a 1-year tank. Wait, how do I put this on the... Can I put this in the stream? Sorry, I don't know how to do anything, guys. I feel like I should know how to do this, how to put a message in the stream, but I do not know how. Anyway, he says, doing a 1-year tank, ton of draft picks over the next 2 years. How do I go about buying injured players from contenders this year? Well, that would depend on what players you do have, because when a contending team loses a player to injury, what they're looking for is a replacement player. They're looking for a guy that they can put in their lineup to replace that injured player. So I'm not entirely sure. You'd have to let me know who's on the roster. But which players do you have right now that potentially project as above replacement level starting options? That would be the question, because that's really what they're going to want. They don't... If a contending team loses an injured player, they don't really want draft picks for them. Even if they could potentially take those draft picks and then trade them into another player, it's usually just they're not willing to go multiple steps. So I would base it on that premise. You know, if you already have traded away all your players for picks, then you kind of just have to sit on it for the most part. Okay, well those are the transactions I have. Not a great week. This next week we'll have a ton of stuff to talk about after all the week 1 games. But for now, I'm going to move into these trades that I made. That I've made all of these over the past week, and I have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Dynasty trades over the past week that I'm going to talk about here, and we'll get a few more possible transactions in with players that I've been acquiring, so I can talk about that. Let me move over here to a different type of layout. Let's see. Okay, hold on. There we go. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my trades in this little slideshow here. Just put this in the middle of the screen for now. So we're looking at these deals, and this is the trade I made. This is the most recent trade. I made this trade about 3 hours ago, and then I went ahead and put Brock Bowers on the thumbnail because I guess I just realized that I didn't have as much as I wanted, and I have an incredible amount of conviction about Brock Bowers, and I just think that, I mean, if you saw the video today, I talked about how I think he could break fantasy football. I think he's going to be the Dynasty tight end 1 next year. He's just a tremendous prospect. Probably almost certainly the best tight end prospect that we've ever seen from a fantasy perspective. And I just think he's extremely safe. Just from a talent standpoint, it's really, really hard for me to see how he would fail. And I think when I've said that before, some people are like, well, what about Kyle Pitts? You know, people thought that about Kyle Pitts. And yes, people did think that about Kyle Pitts, but it is different in that Pitts is like this unicorn athlete who never really projected as a traditional tight end. So it was always sort of baked into him, his player profile, that he was going to have to be used differently than a regular tight end. And that inherently adds risk to the equation because you need a coach that knows how to use that type of a player that can be a mismatch out wide and in the slot. Brock Bowers, on the other hand, he doesn't require that stuff. He can be used in kind of interesting, unique ways where like you can put him in the backfield and you can play him at fullback and you can do this and that, but he can just play tight end, traditional tight end. He is a very good blocker, and he's exactly the same size as Sam Laporta. He's an even better athlete, so he can just play tight end the traditional way, but he's just an incredible talent. Like just what he was able to do at Georgia from an efficiency standpoint, just dominating that offense despite other very talented players being involved. So all that to say, I have a lot of Kyle Pitts in Dynasty, and I'm like not scared of rostering Kyle Pitts in Dynasty, but just I think that there's the tiniest bit of risk. Well, more than a tiny bit. There is risk with Kyle Pitts because this is pretty much the put up or shut up season for him, where we've made all the excuses, and I think they're all valid excuses. That he was incredible as a rookie. He was in an atrocious passing game, worst passing game in the league as a sophomore. He was putting up the best peripheral statistics of any tight end in the league until he got hurt. And then last season, he's recovering from injury, still in a bad offense. Multiple film analysts saying he wasn't right. Now he's said to be all the way back, that he's been great in camp. So I think all the excuses for Kyle Pitts have been valid. That being said, if for some reason he doesn't deliver the goods this year, if he doesn't do what he's been kind of built up to be as a tight end, the value is going to go fast. He is going to plummet. And so even though I think that's pretty remote, it is still a risk. And so with Bowers, I think Bowers has the same ceiling as Kyle Pitts. I think either one of them could finish as the tight end one in Dynasty. It could finish as the tight end one in a given season. But with Bowers, there's so much less risk because he is a rookie. We have all those years of excuses that we're already coming to the end of with Kyle Pitts. So I didn't see any reason to value Pitts above him. I have them in the same tier, but I have Bowers ahead. And so this was just an opportunity to turn one of my Pitts shares into a Bowers share by adding essentially nothing. Like I don't have a lot of value in Spencer Rattler. I would think of him as like a 3rd round pick is how I would value Rattler. So, for me to get into a player I'm trying to acquire more of, to get out of a player I'm maybe a little bit overexposed to, this just seemed like a great deal for my team, just based on all those factors. Yellow Dog says he has a bad logo on his helmet. I see what you mean, Brock Bowers. I mean, the Raiders are not the most inspiring destination. I'll have to give you that. But I don't know, man. I'm gonna have to just lean into the talent on this one, because I don't think Bowers can fail. I don't think he's gonna fail anywhere. I think he's gonna be really good. He's my highest drafted tight end on Underdog this year, so I'm all in. All right. I forgot what order I put these trades. Wait. Aha. I thought there was one the other way. Okay. This is another trade that I made today. I made it this morning, and I made it in the Pure Potential Invitational. So this is the first and only Pure Potential Discord members league that we drafted to start up, I don't know, like a month ago, a little bit less than a month ago. And this is not the type of trade that I normally make. So I sent away a 1st round pick and a 2027 3rd for Xavier Worthy. It's kind of off brand. What happened with this is, in the startup, I ended up with 3 future firsts. And I built a pretty solid team. Like, I'll pull it up real quick. Oops, not trying to move that. Holy cow. I'll pull up the team real quick. Put this off to the side. If we go up to the Pure Potential, Pure Potential Invitational. My team right now, Jalen Hurts, Joe Mixon, David Montgomery, Devonta Smith, Tank Dell, Rashee Rice, Evan Ingram, Ramondre Stevenson, Brian Robinson, DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Herbert. So I have kind of the 2-star quarterbacks as my anchors in Hurts and Herbert, and then I ended up not picking again until like near the end of round 4, which is where I believe I got Devonta Smith. So it's a very flat team at the skill positions, and I had all these extra picks, trying to figure out what to do with them. And I just decided Worthy was a player that, again, I wanted a little bit more of. I only had 1 share of Worthy across 22 leagues, and so I just kind of got this itch, like, what if he scores 2 touchdowns on Thursday? What is his value going to look like? And, he looked good in the preseason, and I was kind of 50-50 on Worthy as a prospect, where I thought he was kind of a high variance prospect. He had really good freshman production. didn't grade out super well in reception perception, but was the most productive weapon at Texas. So I was kind of like wishy-washy on Worthy, and then he goes to Kansas City. Obviously, great landing spot. He gets the draft capital. So I was pretty in on him in that 109, 110 range. I was drafting Ladd McConkey over him. I had him kind of neck and neck with Brian Thomas. But I would argue that things are now like trending more positively for him, just given he's already become a full-time starter for the Chiefs. Whereas like you look at Rashee Rice last year, even he had a great second half of the season, but he was in a rotation to start the year, and that was with Justin Watson, Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Kadarius Toney, like really really bad wide receivers, and he wasn't a full-time starter. You look at Sky Moore, who obviously he sucks, but as a rookie he couldn't find the field, and so the fact that the Worthy's already like a full-time starter for them, they have big plans for him, they're going to manufacture touches for him, that's already a good sign where I feel like I'm willing to kind of bump him up a little half tier from where he was in rookie drafts. And just having these 3 first-round picks, I thought, why don't I invest in a player who can potentially help me now and has like a faster path to giving me a return on investment and a larger return on investment than the pick. Now, we'll see what happens. The team that owns the first-round pick that I traded, it could go either way for them. They have a young team, so they could be pretty good, or they could have some growing pains and they could struggle. So it's really, we can't really grade the deal until we see where that first ends up. And typically I'm on the side of like, just keep the first and just let the chips fall. But again, I had all this excess value. I want to compete this year. So I either want to take the chance on Worthy being a star that I can use, or he breaks out, gains value. Maybe I can flip him for a higher scoring player more easily than I could just a first round pick. So that's the thought process there. I mean, it's a fun trade. Get to root for Worthy a little bit more. I'm all in on Mahomes having kind of a huge bounce back season and getting back to the vintage Mahomes. So I want to be attached to that. I want to have Rashee Rice. I want to have Xavier Worthy so that I can benefit from that type of a thing. So that was that one. Let's see. So we got the Bowers trade, the Worthy trade. Okay. Here's another one that we have. Let me make this one a little bit bigger so you can see it, because this is a larger deal. If you guys have any questions, like follow-up questions about these trades, feel free to drop them in the chat. I believe I made this trade yesterday morning. And this was just a case where the other manager was really getting on me about trading Breece Hall. This is in Trade Fiends United. Oh, I can't pull up the team because Sleeper doesn't let me do best ball on desktop. Okay. All right. Well, I'll just pull up the ADP for now. Okay. So anyway, the deal with this trade, I sent away Breece Hall, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, Sam Darnold, for Jahmyr Gibbs, a first and 2 seconds. And the thing with this team is like, this was the startup last year. I got a little bit over my skis trying to make the playoffs in this league, and ended up with kind of a fragile roster where like all my wide receivers are older. Like I had Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins, I have Devontae Adams as well. I didn't have a lot of surplus value, and with it being a best ball league, it's also kind of important to have legitimate depth on your bench, like actual players that score points. And I didn't have a lot of those either. Like most of my bench were kind of late round rookies, waiver pickups. So I didn't think that this team really had the legs just looking at it. And I was really putting off the rebuild until this team came and reached out about Breece Hall. And I was like, okay, well, I can use this as kind of a springboard to start my rebuild. Because I think I don't really have any other tanking teams right now across my portfolio. Like this is really the first team that I'm like, all right, we're throwing in the towel on 2024. We're going to regroup for next year. I'm being very hesitant about doing that in a lot of my leagues. Some of them are going to turn into those types of rebuilds if players get hurt early in the season, or the guys that I think are going to get me there, just aren't going to get me there. But this team was ready. It was time for a quick rebuild because I do have a decent core. Like I have Gibbs, I have Lamar, I have Malik Neighbors. Now I have 2 firsts and 3 seconds next year. So there's pieces here. But I think the value works out in this trade where, you look at Gibbs and a first for Hall and Keenan Allen. It's probably about fair. Like if Keenan Allen's like a mid-second, I think Gibbs and Hall are less than a first-round pick apart, but probably more than a second. Definitely more than a second in my mind. So I feel like that kind of evens out. And then it's like, okay, I'm getting a second for Hopkins. That feels like a win. And a second for Darnold, especially if I'm not competing, that feels like a win. So I think I'm very happy with that value. You think about what does this trade look like in January with Hopkins entering his age 33 season, Keenan Allen entering his age 33 season, Sam Darnold is no longer a starter. It's one of those types of trades that you kind of can't lose. There's really no way I can lose this trade in the long run. So that's the type of deal you want to make in a rebuild when you're getting rid of these, you're shedding pieces. And I think with Darnold specifically, like I'm not sure I ever would have gotten value for him if I wasn't using him as part of this larger deal where I can kind of strong arm the other manager into giving me some value for Darnold to get this deal finished. So I liked this one. It was hard to send away Breece Hall. It's just I'm just very high on him, but sometimes the value is the value, and that's just what it is. I'll probably look to trade Gibbs from here, pick up some more picks, move that value into like a less fragile position, and we'll see where we can go from there. This trade was made the day before Ricky Pearsall was shot. Thankfully, he's all right. He is on the pup, but it seems like he's gonna be fine. And this was just like really crazy timing, to be honest. So I guess what day was that? Saturday. I think Saturday was the day that he got shot. So this was a trade on Friday. I was just looking for a more useful wide receiver because I took over this team in a dispersal draft, and overall the value on it is fine, but it's really weak at wide receiver, and it's kind of overstocked at running back, and I didn't have a lot of wide receivers that I could rely on to start. And so with Pearsall, he was kind of expendable for me. I don't know when he's going to play. I'm not that sold on him as a prospect. So I was kind of comfortable moving him for Godwin, like just a guy that I'm pretty confident is going to score like 14 points per game and be fine. So I just made that quick switch. There's not that much to it. I just needed a wide receiver, and I was comfortable moving Pearsall, and it was just crazy timing that he got shot right after I traded him away. Wait, is that the same trade twice? Oh, no, that's a different trade. That is a different trade. My son is playing in the hall behind me. I'm not sure what he's doing. All right. So we've gone through what? 4 trades? Okay, we've got 2 more deals I want to recap here. So this one, in this trade, it looks like I traded away Spencer Rattler twice this week. That's not good news. Just for all of you holding Derek Carr, he's probably going to get hurt or abducted by aliens or something in the next couple of days since I traded away all my Spencer Rattler shares. But either way, I traded away Rattler, Odunze, a first, and a second for Jonathan Taylor, Jalen Waddle, and Antonio Gibson. This one, I did waffle on this a little bit. One, because I'm very high on Odunze, or I'm excited about having him in some leagues. Just I'm in on Caleb. I liked Odunze's prospect profile, so I'd like to benefit in Dynasty if that pairing ends up to be really good. But I also was skeptical about trading away my first just this early in the year without kind of knowing where I stand. But I couldn't really pass up the value here because I'm coming out of a rebuild that last year this was an auction startup. I don't know if you've ever done an auction startup, but it's absolute chaos. and it didn't go great for me. It wasn't a total disaster, but it didn't go great for me. And I didn't really have the pieces last year to compete in year one. So I decided to just totally tear it down to the bones and then rebuild it from scratch. So I have a ton of rookies on this team. I've been able to acquire a few different pieces. This isn't a best ball league, so I can pull this one up. I've been able to acquire some pieces in this league. So I've got CJ Stroud, Kyron Williams, my one and only Kyron Williams share. Now I have Jonathan Taylor, Drake London, Jalen Waddle, Lad McConkey, Mark Andrews, Tyler Lockett, Mike Williams. That's pretty gross. Ramondre Stevenson and Justin Herbert. And then on the bench, I've got like Bo Nix. I've got Jonathan Brooks, hopefully waiting in the wings to come in later this year. I've got Xavier Legette. I've got Ricky Pearsall in this league. So I have value and I have the pieces to, I think, push for a playoff berth this year. But getting getting Taylor and Waddle was huge for upgrading my lineup. So the way I have it ranked, I have Waddle in the 1.5 base first tier, and I have Taylor in 1.25 base first. So Taylor and Adunze are kind of back to back. So if we just call them a wash, it's a first, a second, and Rattler for Waddle and Gibson. That's about right, based on how I have it ranked. And so if it gives me a better chance to win now without a lot of downside for losing value, and these are both young players, I think it's a deal that made sense for my team. And the last one is pretty straightforward. Nico Collins for Christian Kirk and a first. Nico, just another guy that I'm very high on. I'm rising on. I talked about him in the video today. I put him in the thumbnail, undervalued. Nico Collins, I think I've been underselling his ceiling a little bit, where, all the signals kind of point to this guy being an elite wide receiver talent. And so I'm pretty in. I'm pretty in on him this season. And this is another league where I had too much roster value. Like I was first in the league in trade value. I needed a wide receiver upgrade. I mean, I didn't need one. I could have just played Christian Kirk, or I could have played Chris Godwin or whomever. But the one weak spot, the weakest point on my lineup was wide receiver 3. So I thought, why not take some big swings, go out and get some, wide receiver firepower. I sent out the same kind of offer to a bunch of different managers for different wide receivers. Slightly different versions of it, but for like Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra St. Brown. And this is the one that got accepted. So Christian Kirk in a first. It's like slightly more than I think you should pay in a vacuum. But again, huge surplus of value for me. I might as well spend some of that on a player who I think has legitimate, like, maybe not league winning upside, but like high end wide receiver 1 is in the range of outcomes for him, I think. So I was comfortable making the trade because of the context of my team. I wouldn't necessarily just tell every single person, go trade, a 14 point per game wide receiver plus your first round pick for Nico Collins. But in this case, I think it works. So those are my 6 trades, and amazingly all in different leagues. I still have a lot of pending offers out there that I'm trying to get some more trades in under the wire. One of you guys asked in the chat, I believe it was Tim. No, it wasn't Tim. It was T754. Any last minute buys before the season starts? Yeah, I mean, these are some of the guys. Worthy, Collins, Brock Bowers, Brian Thomas, mostly rookies, because things can change fast for rookies. If they come out with a hot start, the value changes very quickly. Zay Flowers last year, he had like a 40% target share in week 1. His value spiked way up. Eventually did come back down to earth a little bit, but I mean, people were floating him as like a top 12 dynasty wide receiver after that first week. So life comes at you fast when you're a rookie, because your first game in the NFL is 100% of your NFL sample, and people tend to get a little bit crazy in that situation. And so rookies would be the main players that I'd be looking to buy. But Nico, you could see him. he runs 100% of the routes, if he gets like a 26% target share in week 1 on those routes, people might freak out a little bit. So I'm into buying Collins. There aren't a ton of other players that stick out to me as like, you need this player before week 1. Just looking through the ADP, like I think, excuse me, I think people have kind of figured things out. I think mostly everything is efficient. I mean, Garrett Wilson remains a perpetual buy. Justin Herbert remains a buy. Drake May remains a buy. But you know, I've talked about those guys. Malik Neighbors, another rookie. Trevor Lawrence. Yeah, I mean those are my guys. Like same guys I've been touting all along are kind of my ride or dies this season, and we'll see how it goes. I guess Cooper Kupp is another player that could potentially be a sell. I'm not sure how much the best ball brain on Cooper Kupp has reached the Dynasty world. I don't know if you guys are in on the discourse lately about Cooper Kupp, but people have been talking about him a lot, and he's been rising up to the point where in best ball his ADP was like 16th overall or something like that. He was going like 4 spots after Puka Nacua. I think that's kind of insane. Now, with him being an older player, maybe that's not affecting his dynasty cost that much, but if people actually think he's the wide receiver 1 in Los Angeles again, there might be some people in your leagues that are willing to like really overpay. Cooper Kupp is a guy that I would comfortably trade away for any future first. Like if you'll give me a 2026 first for Cooper Kupp, goodbye Cooper Kupp. In fact, I have a couple Cooper Kupps. Say that 5 times fast. That I should probably send out some offers. Future first. Give me a future first and he's yours. That's pretty simple structure. I see there's a couple messages here in the chat. Yellow Dog says, I have a hard time getting anyone to sell me G Wilson for anything short of 3 firsts. Yeah. I couldn't send 3 actual firsts for him, but like I understand people being high and not wanting to trade him. I have him in the two base firsts range. So like 3 late firsts would be in the ballpark for Garrett Wilson, but you don't have to do it. You know, like as much as I love him and I want to acquire him, the big appeal for him is that he hasn't been worth 3 firsts to most people. So sometimes you just get unlucky where your league mates are a little bit more woke to what's going on. But you know, it is tough when you can't get a share of the guy you really want. That one Candy Bar, you got any incoming trades you're thinking about that you haven't accepted? That's a good question. I wish Sleeper would integrate the feature where you have just a little dashboard and you can see all your offers from all your leagues in one place rather than having to toggle to each individual league to see. I tend to be the one who sends out offers though most of the time. So I have some outgoing offers that are pending. I don't think I have any incoming offers that are pending. I tend to respond to those things pretty quickly because I spend too much time on my phone and I'm always sitting at my computer editing a video or writing a video, and I see all those little notifications pop up. So no, I don't think I have any incoming trades that I'm thinking about. Good question though. Just checking a couple other spots. Yeah, none of those. But I do have some other questions you guys asked me. So let me see here what else is going on. So those are my last minute buys, like I said. Two questions from Tim Hanshaw, one of the OG members. What is the most you would buy or sell Drake May for? Well, at this point, I'm comfortable just paying my rankings price for him. Like, straight up, I would just trade Jaden Daniels for Drake May, I think. I don't think you have to do that. Like, you can almost certainly get a plus. But, like, I would just rather have Drake May. Chris Olave, Drake London, Jalen Waddle. Those are players I would offer for May. In all of these cases, if I'm offering more than the market dictates he's worth, I'm always going to try to get something back. You know, give me May and a second for London, right? Like that seems fair. But at a certain point, it's like I just have him ranked there. Like that's just how high I have him ranked. I'm very high on him as a player and a talent, and I think he has a level of upside in value that those wide receivers just frankly don't have. Like he could be a top 5 startup pick by the end of the season. There's literally no way that Chris Olave is a top 5 startup pick this season. So it's just how it is. Don't mean to bother. That one Candy Bar asks, don't mean to bother. What's the normal lead time? I assume that means like wait time on the team breakdowns. So there isn't really a normal time just because I've only been doing this for like 3 weeks now with the team breakdowns and the YouTube memberships. So it's really like as fast as I can get around to it, I'll do it. But that being said, right now we only have there's only a couple of members that are still waiting for a breakdown. I'll have to check my list, but I believe you would be next up because I'm trying to get to all the league winning members for at least one team breakdown before I circle back around for a second for anybody. So yeah, so I should be able to do yours within the week. That would be my expectation. Another question from Tim Hanshaw. This was actually a cool question. Dark horse options at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end who have an opportunity to jump into the top 12 at their respective positions. I didn't get a chance to actually look at these questions prepare answers for these questions ahead of time. So we're going to just wing it here, but I'm going to pull up the ADP. We don't need this slideshow anymore. I'm going to pull up the ADP here, and we're just going to literally look like, okay, who's outside the top 12? Who do I think could jump in? At quarterback, it's very, very easy. The answer is Drake May and Trevor Lawrence. I believe both of those two will be inside the top 12 come season's end, with Jaden Daniels probably sliding out. I guess it'll be hard for them both to get into the top 12 unless we see another surprise disappointment from someone. If I was going to predict, I would say Anthony Richardson could potentially have a big excuse me. If Anthony Richardson really struggles, you could see him sliding down behind May and Lawrence to that QB 12 spot. But it's very contested there in that range at the top because there's just like surprisingly a lot of elite quarterbacks right now. But yeah, May and Lawrence would be my only two picks. I mean, if you wanted to go really dark horse, the only other person I could say is like Deshaun Watson. If he were to somehow play like 2018 Deshaun Watson, like at that point you'd have to put him back in the top 12 because he'd be a top 5 fantasy quarterback and he's like 28 years old. So like he'd have to be there, but that seems pretty unlikely at this point. So I'd say somewhat limited options. At running back outside the top 12, the top 12 ends with Jacobs. I mean, Jonathan Brooks, that's an easy call. Like I would say he should be a betting favorite to be a top 12 running back after this season. And then there's only really a couple of realistic candidates that I see because the 2025 running back class is just going to crowd out, I think, a few of these guys. But James Cook, I definitely think can overtake Rachaad White and Josh Jacobs at the very least to jump into the top 12. I'm higher on him than those players. I think he's better than those players. I think he is set up for success in the Buffalo offense. The configuration of the offense we saw once Joe Brady took over, I think is really going to be conducive to James Cook. And then outside of that, I mean, I guess Trey Benson, like if James Conner falls off at the end of the year, he, ends with an injury and we get like 5 games of Trey Benson just tearing it up. I think he pretty easily jumps into the top 12. And then after that, who knows really? Like, I don't know, Blake Corum, if Sean McVay decides tomorrow that Blake Corum's the starter instead of Kyron, crazier things have happened. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Javonte Williams. He's still only 24 years old, doesn't turn 25 until March. Maybe we see pre-injury Javonte Williams and he gets like 250 carries and 60 receptions and finishes in the top 12. You got to use your imagination with these things sometimes, but I could definitely see it. And then wide receivers. This is the one where you can really, on one hand, it's like the top 12 is so good already. Like, I don't think there's any chance that we see Jefferson, Lamb, Chase, Amon-Ra, Marv, Wilson, Puka, or AJ Brown or Malik Neighbors fall out of the top 12. I think after this season, we're going to see Tyreek Hill out of the top 12. And then Olave and London, I'm definitely high on, but they're not immovable. They're certainly not immovable. So I think, like, for example, Nico Collins could very easily jump into the top 12 early in the season. If he's just flat out outscoring Olave and London, they're all close enough in age that his situation is just going to win out. And I think he would take that spot. Rome Odunze, another easy one where he's tied to Caleb. He's a first-round pick, top 10 pick. If he displaces Keenan Allen or Keenan Allen gets hurt or something, a couple of good games from Odunze is really, I think, all it would take for people to get there with him. I mean, it's mostly rookies. Like, it's pretty much all rookies. Like, Xavier Worthy, Brian Thomas, I can totally see it. The only non-rookies would really be, like, Tank Dell, maybe. If we see, like, Diggs is sudden, like, if Diggs is, like, totally washed, and Tank Dell, like, just immediately steals his soul. And I guess Jalen Waddle technically is an answer because he's at wide receiver 13. So he could definitely sneak in as well. Tight ends is like not even fair because tight end 12 is all the way down here with David Njoku. And honestly, there's not even that many tight ends I think could get up to even this height. Like literally, I think it's two. Like it's two guys. Ben Sinnott definitely could. You know, he's going to start out slow. You see him get into the offense a little bit later on. He probably jumps into the top 12. Luke Musgrave is still possible. I still like Musgrave, but it's going to come down to how much they really are committed to using Tucker Kraft. Because if Tucker Kraft is just going to take 30% of the routes straight up, like Musgrave just isn't going to have a large enough role to get there. My real dark horse would be Greg Dulcich. I have an undying affection for Greg Dulcich. He had a good rookie season, very little target competition in Denver. If Bo Nix is good, there's not necessarily anything precluding Greg Dulcich from being a very productive receiving tight end in a room that desperately needs weapons. So that would be my like crazy home run pick. Yellow Dog mentioned Jaden Reed, I guess, as a top 12 candidate. Yeah, I don't see it personally with Reed. I just really struggle to see the ceiling where, you know, he played exclusively as a slot receiver last year, like literally couldn't get on the field in a 2 wide receiver set to save his life. And you have Dobbs, who I don't think is any good, but I mean, he's not bad, but he's not special. But the team insists on playing him on a high percentage of the routes. You have Christian Watson, who just undeniably adds an element to an offense where they're not going to take him off the field when he's healthy. They're going to let him play. They're at least going to rotate him in very frequently. And then you have Dontavian Wicks, who I think is also very talented, super efficient last year as a rookie. So it's like, I don't see the outs for Reed to consolidate enough of the offense where we're already betting or hoping that he can get on the field in these 2 wide receiver sets. But even still, he's not going to approach a 90% route share, I don't think, with these other wide receivers on the team. And then even if he's on the field, like, is he really going to consolidate enough volume? Is he that much? Is he, leaps and bounds better than the other wide receiver talents on the team? I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. So I'm pretty skeptical on his ceiling. He's fallen to a point where I'm totally comfortable with him in Dynasty, like late round 7, going after Jake Ferguson and Joe Mixon. Like I'm definitely in on Reed at that price, but I would be stunned to see him land in the top 12, I think. I didn't mention JSN. I suppose JSN is a candidate. JSN could be, I guess he could be top 12. I don't know. Wide receiver 31 in Dynasty right now, according to the last month of ADP. I really struggle to picture a player who had that poor of a rookie season bouncing back to such a degree that he becomes a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty. Like, it's just very hard for me to picture. Because you look at the players that are up there. I guess Nico Collins would be the one kind of reclamation project success story, but he has the benefit of kind of coming from nowhere, where he didn't feel like when you have these super high expectations and then you fail, I feel like people get a little bit gun shy. I don't know. I'm not expecting JSN to be that good. I think he could definitely bounce back from what he did last year and become a perfectly adequate wide receiver 2 type. I really, really struggle to see him as a wide receiver 1 in Dynasty, but I am certainly fallible. I could be wrong. We're going to wrap up these questions here real quick. I might actually push a couple of Yellow Dog, if you don't mind. I might push a couple of your questions to next week. Lone Wolf had a really quick question. 20th round flyer in an FFPC Best Ball Superflex. He already has 4 quarterbacks in Superflex. Do I finish with Brissett or Javon Baker? If those are the only choices, I'm just going to take Javon Baker, because I frankly don't think Jacoby Brissett is playing more than 3 or 4 games this year. So that just doesn't, when you already have 4 quarterbacks, that just isn't interesting to me. And in this format, I don't think you have access to a waiver wire. So I would just take Javon Baker if that's your other choice. And just hope he can find the field later in the season. But yeah, I'm gonna save those other questions for next week, because they're good ones. I want to give them the kind of time that they deserve, and I'm unfortunately out of time for tonight. But we'll pick up with those next week. We'll talk all kinds of week 1 reactions next week. I should have an actual video out on the channel with my biggest week 1 takeaways, but maybe anything that doesn't make the main cut for that, I'll throw that into the live next week, because I'm sure there's going to be so much information. I'm going to have to cut out a lot of stuff just to get to the biggest takeaways for whatever video I put out. And so you guys will get the rest, the little secret sauce. Appreciate you guys tuning in that watched live. Anybody that's watching the replay right now, especially if you watched all the way to this point at the end, I appreciate you. You guys are the lifeblood of this whole enterprise at this point. The membership thing is huge for me. It really gives me the flexibility to put more time into these videos, and I like being able to provide these other perks as well. So hopefully they are providing value for you guys. There will be a full rankings update as well. Before I forget, I'll do that after week 1, and I'll try to make sure to put a good amount of notes in there, just to kind of help you track everything that was moved around after what I suspect will be a pretty insane and chaotic first week of NFL football. So appreciate you guys. Have a good rest of your night. And I will see you all next time.